Marcus Chen stepped off the transport ship and felt the warm air of Kethara Prime fill his lungs. The planet's 2 suns hung in the purple sky, casting strange shadows across the landing pad. He had traveled for 3 months to reach this world, but the journey felt worth it already. The planet was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Crystal trees grew everywhere, their branches catching sunlight and throwing rainbows across the ground. The air itself seemed to shimmer with energy. Marcus had studied many alien worlds, but none like this one. "You must be the human," a voice said behind him. Marcus turned to see his first Valkyrie up close. The being stood about 7 feet tall, with skin that looked like living glass. Light moved under the surface, in patterns that shifted as she spoke. Her eyes were deep blue, like looking into clear water. "I'm Marcus Chen," he said, offering his hand in the human way. The Valkyrie looked at his hand for a moment, then touched it briefly with her own. Her skin felt warm and smooth, like polished stone. "I am Silandra. I will be working with you on this project," she said. Her voice carried a musical tone that made every word sound like a song. Marcus had read about the Valkyrie before coming here, but meeting one was different. They were an old race, much older than humans. Their technology grew instead of being built. Their cities were alive, connected to the planet itself through networks that humans barely understood. "I've read your papers on biological archaeology," Marcus said. "Your work on living memory storage is amazing." Silandra's light patterns shifted. Marcus couldn't read her expression, but something in her posture suggested she wasn't impressed. "Human research methods are different from ours," she said carefully. "We will see if your approaches have any value." The other members of the research team were gathering near the transport. Marcus counted 12 beings from 6 different species. Most of them he recognized from their files: 2 Zephyrians with their blue skin and multiple arms, 3 Korthon with their thick shells and careful movements, a pair of energy beings from the Nexus whose forms flickered like flames. Dr. Velthon, the team leader, was a tall gray being with large black eyes. He moved toward them with the confident stride of someone used to being in charge. "Ah, our human specialist has arrived," Dr. Velthon said. His voice was flat and emotionless. "I trust you understand the importance of this work, Mr. Chen." "I do," Marcus replied. "The chance to study Valkyrie ancestral sites is incredible. These ruins could tell us so much about how your people developed their connection to planetary consciousness." Silandra's lights flickered again. "The sites are sacred to my people. We hope your species can treat them with proper respect." Marcus felt a small sting at her words, but he understood. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy. They were seen as young, reckless, too emotional for serious scientific work. Most alien species preferred to study things from a distance, taking measurements and samples. Humans tended to get personally involved. "I've spent my whole career studying how civilizations connect to their homeworlds," Marcus said. "I understand what these places mean to you." The team began moving toward their base camp. The research station had been built near the ruins, a collection of simple buildings that looked tiny next to the massive crystal structures they had come to study. As they walked, Silandra pointed to the ruins ahead of them. The ancient buildings rose from the ground like frozen music. Their walls curved and twisted in patterns that seemed to follow no human logic, but somehow felt perfectly right. "My ancestors built these over 50,000 years ago," Silandra explained. "Back then, our people could speak directly with the planet. Every Valkyrie could feel the world's heartbeat, share in its dreams." "What happened to that ability?" Marcus asked. Silandra's lights dimmed. "We don't know. Somewhere in our history, the connection was lost. Only a few of us can still hear the planet's voice, and even then, it's very faint." Marcus looked at the ruins with new eyes. These weren't just ancient buildings. They were the remains of a civilization that had achieved something incredible. true harmony between a species and their world. And then somehow, they had lost it. That's why this research is so important, Dr. Velthon said as they reached the base camp. If we can understand how the connection worked, perhaps it can be restored. Over the next few days, Marcus threw himself into the work. The other team members studied the ruins with their instruments, taking careful measurements and recording energy patterns. Marcus did something different. He spent hours just sitting in the ancient spaces, trying to feel what the builders had felt. The other scientists found this approach puzzling. The Zephyrians whispered among themselves about human irrationality. The Korthon made disapproving clicking sounds when they saw Marcus meditating in the ruins instead of taking proper scientific notes. But Silandra began to watch him with something that might have been curiosity. "What are you trying to do?" she asked one evening as Marcus sat quietly in what had once been a great hall. "I'm trying to listen," Marcus said. "Your ancestors didn't build these places just as shelters. They were tools for connection. I'm trying to understand how they worked." Silandra was quiet for a long moment. Then, she sat down beside him, her crystalline form catching the last light of the setting suns. "I can still hear it sometimes," she said softly. "The planet's voice. It's like a song that's almost too quiet to make out." Marcus felt something shift between them. For the first time since arriving, he sensed that maybe, despite their differences, they might actually be able to work together. "Maybe," he said, "we can learn to hear it more clearly." 3 weeks into the expedition, Marcus made a discovery that changed everything. He was working alone in the deepest part of the ruins, in a chamber that the team had almost missed. The walls here were different from the others, darker crystal that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. Strange symbols covered every surface, symbols that didn't match any known Velkari writing. Marcus was taking pictures of the symbols when his scanner started beeping frantically. The readings made no sense at first. The crystal walls weren't just showing energy patterns. They were storing information, massive amounts of it. "Silandra," he called through his communicator, "I need you down here. Now." When Silandra arrived, her lights immediately began pulsing in rapid patterns. Marcus had learned that meant she was excited or worried. Maybe both. "These symbols," she whispered, touching the dark crystal. "I've never seen them before, but they feel familiar." "My scanner says there's some kind of data storage," Marcus said. "Can you interface with them?" Silandra placed both hands on the wall. Her skin began to glow, and the dark crystal responded, lighting up in slow waves. For several minutes, she stood perfectly still. Then she jerked her hands away as if the wall had burned her. "What did you see?" Marcus asked. Silandra's lights were flickering in patterns Marcus had never seen before. Rapid, chaotic flashes that looked almost like panic. "We need to get Dr. Velthon and the others." An hour later, the entire research team stood in the chamber. Dr. Velthon examined the readings, while the other scientists murmured among themselves in their various languages. "This appears to be a historical record," Dr. Velthon announced. "But the data is extremely complex. Silandra, you were able to access it?" Silandra nodded slowly. "It's written in the old language, the one our ancestors used when they could still speak with the planet. I could only understand pieces of it." "What pieces?" Marcus asked. Silandra's lights dimmed to almost nothing. "It's a warning about something called the fire time, a great burning that comes from the sky." Dr. Velthon's large eyes grew even larger. "Fire time? What kind of fire?" "I don't know. The record is damaged. But it happened before. Many times. And..." Silandra paused, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "It's going to happen again." The team worked around the clock for the next 2 days, trying to decode the ancient warning. Marcus found himself working closer and closer with Silandra. While the others focused on the technical data, she helped him understand the emotional context of the records. The ancient Velkari had faced this fire time before. They had survived it, but barely. And they had left this warning for future generations, hoping they would be better prepared. On the third day, the team's astronomer, a quiet Korthan named Shelvar, made the connection. "The stellar data," she announced during their morning meeting. "I've been analyzing the energy patterns mentioned in the records. They match solar flare activity, but on a massive scale." Dr. Velthan leaned forward. "Explain." "This system's star follows an unusual cycle," Shelvar continued. "Every 12,000 years, it produces a series of connected flares. The radiation and particle streams would superheat any planet in this system." "How long until the next cycle?" Marcus asked, though he already feared the answer. Shelvar's shell clicked nervously. "According to my calculations, we have 6 days, maybe 7. The silence that followed was complete. Marcus felt his heart pounding in his chest. Around him, the alien scientists processed this information in their own ways. The Zephyrians' blue skin darkening. The energy beings flickering more rapidly. "Doctor." Velthan's black eyes growing impossibly wide. "We need to contact the Galactic Council immediately," Dr. Velthan said finally. "Full evacuation protocols." Within hours, the research camp became a chaos of activity. Emergency signals went out to every corner of the galaxy. Council ships began jumping into the system, their holds empty and ready to take on refugees. But as the evacuation plans developed, a problem became clear. The Velkari didn't want to leave. Marcus stood with Silandra on a hill overlooking the main Velkari city. The crystal spires rose into the purple sky like frozen music, beautiful and peaceful. It was hard to believe that in less than a week, stellar fire would turn all of this to ash. "Your people have to evacuate," Marcus said. "There's no choice." Silandra's lights pulsed slowly, sadly. "You don't understand. We can't just leave. Cathara Prime isn't just our home. It's part of us. The planet's consciousness flows through every Velkari. Without it, we'll die. Maybe not right away, but slowly, over generations. But if you stay here, you'll die in days." "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "The Council has offered to relocate us to 3 different worlds. Nice places with similar environments. But they won't have the connection. Our children will be born empty, cut off from the song that makes us who we are." Marcus felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. "So, what will your people choose?" Silandra looked out over her crystal city. "Some will leave. The young ones, mostly, who still have hope that we might find a way to reconnect somewhere else. But most will stay. They'd rather die as true Velkari than live as empty shells." Over the next 2 days, Marcus watched the evacuation efforts with growing horror. The Galactic Council had sent their largest ships, enough to carry every Velkari on the planet. But less than a third of the population was willing to board them. The Council officials were frustrated. To them, it was simple mathematics. Death versus life. Any rational being would choose life. But Marcus was beginning to understand that the Velkari saw it differently. To them, losing their connection to the planetary consciousness was a kind of death too, maybe a worse one. On the 4th day, Silandra made her own choice. She volunteered for something called the last recording. "What's that?" Marcus asked when she told him. "A few of us will stay behind to record as much as we can before the end," she explained. "Our history, our songs, our scientific knowledge. We'll transmit it all to the evacuation ships so that something of our civilization survives." Marcus stared at her. "You're volunteering to die." "I'm volunteering to make sure my people's memory doesn't die with them." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He walked through the research camp, past the packed equipment, and the scientists preparing to leave. The evacuation ships hung in the sky like metal moons, waiting for the final refugees. In 2 days, Those ships would jump away to safety. The stellar event would begin. And Keth-Ara Prime would burn. He found himself standing at the edge of the ruins, looking up at the stars. Somewhere up there, solar forces were building toward an explosion that would sterilize this entire world. And down here, people he had come to care about were choosing to face it rather than abandon everything that made them who they were. Marcus thought about the ancient records they had found. The Velkari had survived the fire time before. Somehow, they had found a way. But the knowledge of how they had done it was lost, buried in damaged data that they couldn't fully decode. Unless they could find another way to look at the problem. A different perspective. A human perspective. For the first time since learning about the coming disaster, Marcus began to feel something other than hopeless dread. He felt the familiar stirring of curiosity that had driven him to become an archaeologist in the first place. Maybe, just maybe, there was still something they could do. The announcement came at dawn on the 5th day. Dr. Velthon gathered the research team for the final evacuation briefing. All non-essential personnel will board the transport in 4 hours, he said. Essential team members have until sunset to complete final data collection. The Council ships will begin their jump to safety at first light tomorrow. Marcus listened to the familiar sounds of departure. Equipment being sealed, data cores being backed up, final reports being transmitted to the home worlds, everything orderly and logical. Everything according to protocol. Mr. Chen, Dr. Velthon called as the meeting ended. Your transport assignment is Bay 7. Please have your samples ready for loading. Marcus looked around at his colleagues. The Zephyrians were already packing their instruments. The Korthan moved with their usual careful efficiency, sealing specimen containers. Everyone was doing exactly what they were supposed to do. I'm not leaving, Marcus said. The packing sound stopped. Every head turned toward him. Dr. Velthon's black eyes blinked slowly. I'm sorry. Did you say you're not leaving? I'm staying. There's still work to do here. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Then Dr. Velthon made a sound that might have been laughter, if his species could laugh. Mr. Chen, I think you misunderstand the situation. In approximately 36 hours, this planet's atmosphere will ignite. The surface temperature will reach over 2,000 degrees. There will be no work to do because there will be no surface left to work on. I understand perfectly, Marcus said. I'm still staying. One of the Zephyrians stepped forward, her forearms gesturing in patterns that Marcus recognized as concerned confusion. Human Marcus, she said in her whistling voice. This makes no logical sense. What can you accomplish by dying here? Marcus looked around the room at faces that showed every emotion from confusion to pity. These beings had worked with him for months. They respected his skills, even liked him in their way. But none of them could understand what he was thinking. Maybe nothing, Marcus admitted. But there's something in those records we haven't figured out yet. The ancient Velkari survived the fire time before. There has to be a way. Doctor, Velthon made that not laughter sound again. Mr. Chen, our best scientific minds have analyzed every piece of data in those ruins. If there was a solution, we would have found it. Your best scientific minds think like you, Marcus said. Maybe this needs someone who thinks differently. The Korthan astronomer, Shelvar, clicked her shell in what Marcus had learned was their version of a psi. Human emotional attachment, she said to the others. They form bonds that override survival instinct. It's a known species trait. Marcus felt anger flare in his chest. This isn't about emotion. It's about not giving up when there might still be an answer. But even as he said it, Marcus knew that wasn't entirely true. Yes, he believed there might be something they had missed, but he also couldn't bear the thought of leaving Silandra and the other Velkari to face the fire time alone. Dr. Velthon approached him with the careful movements of someone dealing with a potentially dangerous situation. Mr. Chen, I'm going to recommend that you be declared temporarily unfit for decision-making. The stress of this situation has obviously affected your judgment. My judgment is fine, Marcus said firmly. I'm an adult human citizen of the Galactic Federation. I have the right to make my own choices, even stupid ones. For the next 2 hours, Marcus faced a parade of people trying to convince him to leave. His fellow researchers pleaded with him. Dr. Velthon threatened to have him sedated and carried aboard the transport. A council official contacted him directly to inform him that staying would void his citizenship and his research credentials. None of it changed his mind. The hardest conversation was with Silandra. She found him in the ruins as the evacuation ships began lifting off in the distance. Her crystalline form seemed dimmer than usual, her internal lights pulsing with slow, sad rhythms. Why? She asked simply. Marcus sat down on a piece of fallen crystal that had once been part of a great arch. Because I think there's still a chance. Because someone needs to keep looking. You could look from anywhere. You could take the data with you and study it safely. Marcus shook his head. It doesn't work that way. This place, this planet, it's part of the puzzle. I can't understand it from a distance. Silandra was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note Marcus had never heard before. Something like wonder. Your species really is different, isn't it? The others, they see a problem with no logical solution, and they accept it. You see the same problem, and refuse to accept it. Is that bad? I don't know, Silandra said. But it's interesting. As the hours passed, the planet grew quieter. Most of the evacuation ships had departed, carrying refugees to new worlds that would never truly be home. The research camp was almost empty now. Just a few buildings and some abandoned equipment. Marcus spent the time going through the ancient records again, looking for anything they might have missed. The data was vast and complex, filled with references to concepts that didn't translate well into any modern language. But there were patterns. References to something called the deep connection. Mentions of a joining between the planetary consciousness and something else. And always, the promise that the fire time could be turned from destruction into renewal. As night fell, Silandra joined him in the archive chamber. She had been working with the other volunteers, recording the final transmissions to the evacuation fleet. But now, that work was done. The last ship leaves in 3 hours, she said. Marcus nodded without looking up from the data screens. Find anything useful in your recordings? Some things. Old songs that mention the fire time. Stories about the deep connection. But nothing clear enough to help. They worked together in comfortable silence, two beings from different worlds united by their refusal to give up. Outside, Kethara Prime's 2 suns set for what might be the last time, painting the crystal structures in shades of gold and red. The evacuation ship's departure was marked only by brief flashes of light as they jumped away to safety. Marcus felt a moment of doubt as the last one vanished. He was truly committed now. No going back. Are you afraid? Silandra asked. Marcus considered the question honestly. Yes, but I'm more afraid of not trying. Two. Silandra's lights pulsed in what Marcus had learned was her equivalent of a smile. That's very human. Is that good or bad? I'm beginning to think, Silandra said, that maybe it's exactly what we need. Above them, Kethara Prime's star was already beginning to show the first signs of the coming storm. Solar flares danced across its surface like deadly aurora. Beautiful and terrible at the same time. The fire time was beginning. Marcus felt the change before he saw it. The air itself seemed to hum with energy, and the crystal structures around the ruins began to glow more brightly than he had ever seen them. It's starting, Silandra said, her voice tight with fear. Above them, Kethara Prime's star pulsed with angry red light. The first wave of the fire time had begun. Marcus could see the stellar flares reaching out like fingers of flame, stretching toward their world. They had perhaps 6 hours before the main event. 6 hours to solve a puzzle that had been lost for thousands of years. Marcus turned back to the ancient records with desperate focus. There had to be something. Some detail they had overlooked. Some connection they hadn't made. Here, he said suddenly, pointing at a section of text that Silandra had translated earlier. This part about the deep connection. It doesn't just mean connecting to the planetary consciousness. It means connecting something else to it. Silandra moved closer to look. Connecting what? I don't know. The translation is unclear. But look at this symbol. Marcus highlighted a complex glyph that appeared throughout the text. You said it meant other mind or foreign thought. What if it doesn't mean something bad? What if it means exactly what we need? Silandra studied the symbol, her lights pulsing in rapid patterns. You think it means an outside perspective, a mind that thinks differently from ours. Exactly. The ancient Valkyrie didn't survive the fire time by hiding from it. They survived by finding a way to work with it. But they needed help from a mind that could see solutions they couldn't see themselves. But what kind of mind? There were no other sapient species in this system back then. One. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. What if there were? What if the fire time itself brought them here? They worked frantically, pulling up every piece of data they could find about the ancient period. The records were fragmented, damaged by time and the very disasters they described. But slowly, a picture began to emerge. The first fire time had indeed brought visitors to Kethara Prime. Not conquerors or refugees, but explorers drawn by the unique stellar phenomenon. And somehow, the ancient Valkyrie had made contact with these alien minds. The deep connection wasn't just between your people and the planet, Marcus realized. It was between your people, the planet, and the alien visitors. 3 different types of consciousness, working together. Silandra's lights brightened with excitement and terror. But those aliens are long gone. Even if we understood how the connection worked, we don't have anyone to connect with. Problem. Marcus looked at her steadily. Yes, we do. The understanding hit her like a physical blow. Her crystalline form flickered as she processed what he was suggesting. You want to attempt the deep connection. With yourself as the alien mind. It's the only way, Marcus said. The records show that it's possible. Difficult and dangerous, but possible. Marcus, you don't understand what you're suggesting. The deep connection isn't just sharing information. It means temporarily merging consciousness with the planetary mind. No human has ever attempted anything like that. No human has ever been in this situation before. Outside, the sky was growing brighter as stellar radiation began hitting the upper atmosphere. They could feel the temperature starting to rise. Silandra was quiet for a long moment, her lights cycling through complex patterns. Marcus had learned to recognize this as deep thought, the Valkyrie equivalent of pacing. Even if we attempt this, she said finally, I don't know how to create the connection. The knowledge was lost with our ancestors. But you still have some ability to communicate with the planetary consciousness. You proved that. When you accessed these records. A little. But nothing like what would be needed for a full connection. Marcus stood up and began pacing himself, his mind racing through possibilities. What if we don't need a full connection right away? What if we can build it gradually? He pulled up the technical specifications of the ancient crystal chambers. The ruins weren't just historical sites. They were sophisticated biotechnological installations, designed to amplify and focus the connection between Valkyrie minds and their world. These chambers were built to enhance the natural connection, Marcus said. If we can activate them, even partially, maybe we can create enough of a link for the planetary consciousness to guide us through the rest. Silandra looked around the crystal chamber they stood in. This room was one of the most important connection points. If any of the ancient systems still function, it would be here. They spent precious hours figuring out how to activate systems that had been dormant for millennia. Marcus's human technology provided the analytical tools, while Silandra's natural connection to crystal-based systems provided the interface. Slowly, incredibly, the chamber began to respond. The dark crystal walls started to glow with soft inner light. Energy patterns flowed along pathways that had been silent for thousands of years. "I can feel it," Silandra whispered. "The planetary consciousness. It's curious about you." Marcus felt something too. A presence at the edge of his awareness. Vast and patient, and utterly alien. For a moment, terror nearly overwhelmed him. This was a mind older than human civilization, connected to every living thing on an entire world. "What do I do?" he asked. "Let me create a bridge," Silandra said. "I'll establish a connection between your mind and the planetary consciousness. But Marcus, I have to warn you. This could kill you, or change you in ways we can't predict." Through the chamber's transparent walls, Marcus could see the sky beginning to burn. The stellar storm was intensifying, and the planet's atmosphere was starting to react. They had maybe an hour before the fire time reached its peak. "Do it," Marcus said. Silandra placed her hands on the central crystal formation, and her entire body began to glow. The light spread through the chamber's crystal network, creating pathways of energy that converged on where Marcus stood. "Take my hands," Silandra said. The moment their skin touched, Marcus felt his consciousness explode outward. Suddenly he could feel every crystal tree on the planet, every flowing stream, every breath of wind. The sensation was overwhelming, terrifying, wonderful. And then he felt the planetary consciousness itself. It was like standing before an ocean of thought, ancient and deep and impossibly complex. For a moment, Marcus thought he would be swept away entirely, lost in the vast alien intelligence. But then something unexpected happened. The planetary mind reached back toward him, not with the crushing force he had expected, but with gentle curiosity. It began to explore his thoughts, his memories, his uniquely human way of seeing problems. Through their shared connection, Marcus felt Silandra's amazement. The planetary consciousness had never encountered a mind like his before. Where Velkari thought in harmonious patterns connected to natural rhythms, Marcus's human brain jumped and darted, and made connections that seemed random but somehow worked. And in that difference, they found their answer. The fire time wasn't just destruction. It was also transformation. A massive influx of energy that could be channeled and redirected if you knew how. The ancient Velkari had learned to work with it, using the stellar storm to enhance their connection to their world rather than destroy it. But they had needed an outside perspective to see how. They had needed minds that could think beyond the patterns they knew. Now, as the stellar fire reached toward Keth-Ara Prime, Marcus felt the planetary consciousness beginning to implement the solution. Not fighting the fire time, but embracing it. Turning destruction into renewal. The process began, and Marcus realized that nothing would ever be the same. The fire time hit Keth-Ara Prime like the fist of an angry god. Marcus felt it through the planetary consciousness. Waves of stellar radiation slamming into the upper atmosphere. Superheating gases that should have ignited the entire world. The temperature spiked toward levels that would melt crystal and boil stone. But instead of burning, the planet began to sing. Through his connection to the vast alien intelligence, Marcus understood what was happening. The planetary consciousness wasn't fighting the stellar storm. It was conducting it. Channeling the massive energies through pathways that had been dormant for 12,000 years. Every crystal tree became a lightning rod, drawing down the fire from the sky and feeding it into the planet's core. The crystal cities glowed like stars themselves, converting destructive radiation into pure life energy. The very air shimmered with power as the fire time transformed from apocalypse into renewal. Marcus felt his human mind stretching to understand processes that operated on planetary scales. The sensation should have driven him insane, but somehow his consciousness held together. His stubborn human refusal to break, The same trait that had kept him on a doomed world now kept his identity intact within the cosmic storm. Beside him, Silandra blazed with light as she served as the bridge between two utterly different forms of consciousness. Her crystalline body pulsed with energies that remade her at the cellular level, incorporating patterns of thought and perception that no Velkari had possessed for millennia. The process lasted for hours that felt like years. Marcus experienced the fire time, as the planetary mind did, not as destruction, but as the universe's greatest gift. Every 12,000 years, their star provided exactly the energy needed to renew and enhance the world's consciousness. The ancient Velkari had learned to work with this cycle, using it to deepen their connection to their home. But they had needed outside help to see how. They had needed minds that could imagine solutions beyond their natural patterns. As the stellar storm reached its peak, Marcus felt something fundamental shift in his own consciousness. The connection to the planetary mind wasn't just temporary anymore. Part of him would always be linked to this vast alien intelligence, just as part of it now carried human perspectives within its ancient thoughts. When the fire time finally ended, Marcus and Silandra collapsed to the crystal floor of the chamber, their minds slowly returning to something approaching normal awareness. Did it work? Marcus gasped. His answer came from everywhere at once. The crystal walls pulsed with gentle light, and Marcus felt a presence in his mind that was both familiar and utterly strange. The planetary consciousness spoke to him now, not through Silandra's translation, but directly, in concepts his altered human brain could understand. Asterisk. It worked. Asterisk came the thought that was not quite a voice. Asterisk. The fire time brings renewal. As it always has. As it always will. Asterisk. Silandra sat up slowly. Her crystalline form now shot through with new patterns of light that pulsed in rhythms Marcus had never seen before. I can feel it, she said in wonder. The full connection. Not just whispers, but the complete song of the world. Marcus helped her to her feet, surprised by how natural the movement felt. His human body had been changed by the experience too, though more subtly. He felt stronger, more aware, as if his senses had been sharpened and expanded. Outside, Keth-Ara Prime was transforming. The crystal forests grew taller and more brilliant. The cities pulsed with renewed life. Streams of energy flowed visibly through the air, connecting every living thing in vast networks of shared consciousness. The evacuation ships, Marcus said suddenly. They'll think the planet was destroyed. Silandra smiled, an expression that now carried both her natural grace and something uniquely human. A grin of pure triumph. Let's send them a message they won't believe. The return of the Galactic Council ships 3 days later was met by impossible sights. Not only had Keth-Ara Prime survived the fire time, it had been transformed by it. The planet glowed with life energy visible from orbit. The crystal cities had grown into structures of breathtaking beauty and obvious power. Dr. Velthon was among the first to land, his large black eyes even wider than usual as he tried to process what he was seeing. This is impossible, he kept repeating as Marcus and Silandra showed him through the renewed ruins. The stellar radiation should have sterilized the entire surface. It would have, Marcus agreed, if we had tried to fight it. But the ancient Velkari learned something that we forgot. Sometimes the best way to survive destruction is to turn it into something else. The scientific explanation took days to convey, even with the enhanced crystal chambers to help demonstrate the energy conversion processes. The council scientists struggled to understand how a planetary consciousness could orchestrate such precise manipulation of stellar forces. But they couldn't argue with the results. Keth-Ara Prime hadn't just survived, it had evolved. The Velkari who had stayed behind found their connection to their world stronger than it had been in thousands of years. And something new had been added to the planetary consciousness: human adaptability and creative problem-solving. Marcus found himself changed in ways that became clearer with each passing day. He retained his human personality and memories, but part of his mind now operated on the same vast scales as the planetary intelligence. He could feel the flow of energy through crystal networks, sense the growth patterns of entire forests, understand the deep rhythms that connected all life on the world. Silandra had changed too. The bridge she had formed during the connection had left her with something no Velkari had possessed before: the ability to think outside the harmonic patterns that defined her species. She approached problems with a flexibility that amazed her own people. "What are you now?" Dr. Velthon asked Marcus during one of their sessions, documenting the transformation. "Still human? Something else?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "I'm still me. But I'm also part of something bigger now. I think I'm what humans become when they stop seeing cooperation as weakness." The Council designated Kethara Prime as the site of the galaxy's first truly integrated human-alien research facility. Scientists from dozens of species came to study the successful merging of consciousness types. The Velkari, with their enhanced connection to their world and their new human-influenced adaptability, became teachers and guides for other species, seeking deeper harmony with their environments. But the most important change was harder to measure. Word spread throughout the galaxy about the human who had refused to abandon his alien partner, who had stayed on a burning world because he believed there had to be another way. Other species began to look at humanity differently. Yes, humans were emotional and often irrational, but that irrationality sometimes led them to find solutions that pure logic missed. Their refusal to accept impossible as an answer had saved an entire world and created something new in the process. Marcus and Silandra continued working together, exploring the enhanced ruins and helping other researchers understand the deep connections between consciousness and environment. Their partnership had become something unique in the galaxy. Two beings from different worlds who had literally shared minds and emerged as something greater than the sum of their parts. On quiet evenings, they would sit together in the crystal gardens that had grown around the research facility, watching the energy patterns flow through the transformed landscape. Kethara Prime's two suns would set in spectacular displays of color, and the crystal trees would sing with harmonies that carried human melodies within alien rhythms. "Do you ever regret staying?" Silandra asked one evening as they watched the stars appear in the purple sky. Marcus smiled, feeling the vast contentment of the planetary consciousness echo his own peace. "Never," he said. "This is what humans do. We don't abandon the people we care about, even when it seems impossible, even when everyone thinks we're crazy. Especially then." Above them, the stars shone down on a world that had been saved not by superior technology or ancient wisdom, but by the simple human refusal to give up on someone who needed help. And in the deep crystal chambers beneath their feet, the planetary consciousness dreamed new dreams, enriched by human stubbornness and the knowledge that sometimes the most illogical choice is the only right one.